What's up guys, Jam here. Today we'll be covering Chapter 1 of Arc 5, which takes place after Season 2, also known as Arc 4. So if you haven't watched Season 2 or read Arc 4 yet, please come back after doing so to avoid spoilers. Before we get into the rest of the video, please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future chapter summaries. ReZero Arc 4 concluded by giving us more character development for Subaru and Emilia, and their friendship begins developing into a romantic relationship as well. We were also introduced to new members to the Emilia camp, such as Garfield and Otto. It'll be interesting to see how their involvement in future loops will aid Subaru to solve them. The aftermath of the bet is now in full effect as well. Roswaal now has to support Subaru instead of following his gospel, with the caveat that if Subaru were to make a single mistake, failing to save anyone he cares about, Roswaal will kill everyone else, forcing him to restart. Arc 5 begins with a time skip. Exactly 1 year has passed since the events of the Sanctuary and the battle at the Roswaal mansion. The chapter opens with an exhausted Subaru running on a track. As we know, Subaru is still just a human among superhumans in the ReZero world. While his athletic skill is capped, unlike an overpowered isekai main character like Kirito, maximizing it will only help him going forward with any situation he's put in. Subaru crosses the finish line of the track, and waiting for him there is his newly contracted spirit, or tsundere loli, Beatrice. She hands him a towel to cool off, while praising him for his efforts. Since the events of the Sanctuary, Subaru has been working tirelessly to improve himself physically and his relationship with Beatrice. When we last saw Subaru and Beatrice, they were still new to being a spirit user and a contracted spirit. They hadn't had time to develop chemistry and understand each other's strengths and weaknesses. Subaru lacked combat strength, but he made up for it in his stamina and ability to make decisions on the fly. Beatrice is very strong when it comes to combat. However, she doesn't have much stamina and she needs to rely on someone to give her mana. They pair extremely well with one another. Subaru can now fight using magic through his contract with Beatrice, although it's limited as Beatrice exhausted all of her mana in the fight against the Great Rabbit. Unfortunately, Subaru won't be getting Ain's levels of overpowered. Beatrice has to depend on Subaru for all of her mana, similar to how Puck relies on Emilia for mana. However, Emilia has a large reserve of mana while Subaru doesn't. After a year, Subaru and Beatrice's relationship has developed into one that is similar to an older brother and a younger sister. Subaru playfully teases Beatrice and showers her with praise and affection frequently. An example of this is when he tells her, "I love you," and asks her to say it back. Not in a romantic way, of course, otherwise the FBI would be knocking on his door. After the two banter with one another, Subaru picks up Beatrice and they run towards a parkour course to continue his training. It's admirable how far Subaru has come since he first arrived in Lagunica. He was insecure about himself and felt pressure to make something out of himself, instead of wasting his life away like he did back in Japan. It's a night and day difference compared to the Subaru that we see now, who has grown to love himself and has matured after the events of the prior arcs. This Subaru is stronger, humbled, and willing to do whatever it takes to stand next to Emilia's side. He also is not a deadweight when it comes to fighting now as well, since Subaru is now a Spirit Knight thanks to his contract with Beatrice. I think Subaru investing in his parkour skills and conditioning will pay off going forward. He'll be able to escape threats, prolong his life in loops, and be more viable in combat. The parkour course, built in the forest next to the new Roswaal mansion by Garfield, per Subaru's request, resembles a modern-day jungle gym, but built with adults in mind. Subaru's able to practice his parkour skills here, specifically his ability to fall from massive heights and survive. For example, a 6-meter drop would normally spell the end for Subaru. However, through practicing his land and roll technique over the course of a year, Subaru was able to come out unharmed, falling 6 meters down from the top of the parkour course. After landing safely, Subaru makes his way to Beatrice as they begin walking towards the mansion. During the battle against the Great Rabbit, Beatrice depleted years worth of mana that she had stored up. Now she needs to rely on Subaru for mana. Even though Subaru broke his own gate during his fight against Garfield, his body still produces little mana. However, it doesn't have a natural outlet in the form of a gate to go through. If enough mana is built up inside of someone with no outlet, mana poisoning will kick in and they will explode from the inside, by ballooning up like this frog and then popping. Beatrice is able to prevent this from happening to Subaru by using her mana drain ability on him or by simply holding his hand. On their way back to the mansion, the duo run into an exhausted Petra. Subaru, confused by her appearance, asks her why she was in a rush. She told him that Emilia asked her to fetch Subaru, as an important guest had arrived. Subaru then asks who the guest at the mansion was. Petra recalls them being like a kitty. After hearing the word kitty, Subaru immediately thinks of Puck, as he needs to ask him for his daughter's hand, who still hasn't returned to Emilia's side yet since the events of the sanctuary. Petra elaborates further that they weren't a typical kitty per se, rather that they were a catfolk demi-human and that they reminded her of Garfield. While they're walking back to the mansion, Subaru's trying to think of who the guest could be, as he knows several demi-humans in the town next to the mansion, along with several others in Lagunica. The new Roswaal mansion is pretty much an exact replica of the old one. The only difference is that it's further away from Arlem village and the capital of Lagunica. According to Subaru, that is. Once the trio have arrived at the mansion, Subaru notices that there is an unfamiliar carriage at the stables, believing it to be the guest. Petra informs him that the carriage was pulled by a giant dog instead of the dragons typical to Lagunica. Subaru begins thinking about Anastasia's camp, as they were the only group he was familiar with that used dogs instead of dragons. Mid-thought, he's interrupted by a high-pitched voice calling out to him. As he turns to the voice of the sound, standing in front of him is none other than Mimi, the second command of the Anastasia camp's army. They begin catching up with one another, since it's been a while since they last saw each other during the battle against the White Whale. Subaru asks her if any of her comrades, such as Julius, Ricardo, or her brothers came with her. Mimi, the proud little kitten, informs Subaru that she came all by herself. Subaru, still unsure of why Mimi is at the mansion, asks her what the purpose of her visit is. Mimi, getting sidetracked and nearly forgetting the reason she was there, tells Subaru that the entire Emilia camp is invited to a party by Anastasia. And that sums up Chapter 1 of Arc 5. Overall, I believe this was a solid first chapter for this arc. It's nice to see that Subaru is improving himself physically, and it will be interesting to see how it will pay off going forward. I am loving the dynamic between Subaru and Beatrice. It's crazy how far they've come since their first interaction with one another, from Beatrice being a shut-in and pushing everyone away, to her now opening up to Subaru and the others. Subaru has changed Beatrice's life for the better, and Beatrice is now able to help protect Subaru in combat when he was normally a sitting duck. I can't wait to see how the relationship will continue to grow and how it will affect the story going forward. I'm excited to see more of Otto and Garfield in this arc. Both were great additions to the main cast, not to mention how much their unique skills strengthen the Emilia faction as well. Otto has been a pillar of support for Subaru, being there for him at his breaking point in Arc 4, after Roswaal confessed to Subaru being the person who ordered the attack on the mansion. Subaru can consistently count on Otto in future loops to come, and his merchant skills will certainly be useful to Emilia and the others. Garfield will be a great help for Subaru in future loops. He's one of the strongest fighters the Emilia faction has at the moment, and he'll be able to protect Subaru and the others from most threats. Subaru can depend on him to come in clutch against strong opponents. I hope we'll see Garfield more in this arc, as we didn't see much of him working together with the Emilia faction in Arc 4. It's been a while since we've seen Anastasia and the rest of her faction. Julius, Ricardo, and the cat siblings may have gotten stronger and developed new abilities, similar to how Subaru has been doing during the time skip. I'm looking forward to seeing Anastasia and the rest of her faction, and seeing what role they'll play in this arc after being absent from Arc 4. What do you guys think this party that Mimi is inviting the Emilia camp is about? Will other factions such as the Krush, Felt, and Priscilla factions be invited as well? With that being said, if you have any other theories or predictions, I'd love to hear about them in the comment section down below. I'll be reading all of the comments, and I'll be responding to and discussing a few theories or predictions in the next video. I plan on covering all chapters of Arc 5 and all future arcs. If you don't want to miss out, please consider subscribing. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day.